Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you can all hear me and my audio is coming through good. I'm actually doing this stream today by myself because the opposition podcast is not happening tonight. Avi Yemeni is not available. Would you consider all the times that he's accused me of not being available? Well, today Avi is not available, so I'm actually going to do a live stream and do Rukshan on X, which is something that I've done in the past and something that I want to actually do more frequently into the future as well. Maybe nightly episodes, maybe in the morning. I'm not 100% sure when I restart this, but that's right. Many of you have asked for me to do stuff without Avi, and here I am. My Mossad controller is not in the house today. As you can see, just like when we did the opposition podcast, the comments will come through and I'll try to read your comments. You can do super chats as well on the YouTube. But yeah, X comments, Facebook comments, and comments from YouTube will actually come through as well. And I'll try to answer any questions anyone has. But yeah, technically, almost similar format to the opposition podcast, because obviously we talk about the news of the week and what's going on. But I'm going to try to mix it up a little bit and really focus on getting news as it's happening from X. Maybe using a bit of AI, using Grok. I want to do something different and maybe go to Grok and see what's trending in Australia and bring up some of that news as well. But thanks for joining in, guys, and hopefully, as I do more of these shows, more of you guys can come in and we can have a chat. Your comments can come through, and we can have a little bit of fun. I can see some detractors have already come on board. Music Animal Enthusiast says, "Where are you? Why are you a cooker?" Look, I'm very open to all types of comments, so I will try to read even those which are attacking me in some way. So, "Why are you a cooker?" Says one of the biggest cookers on X. So there you go. Now, another comment from Viv. I'll get to the news quick after, but first I want to read some of these comments. So probably better without him. At least you'll get a word in. I mean, a lot of people say Avi actually jumps in and cuts me off, but I don't know. He's improved a lot over the years that I've done the opposition podcast with him, and he actually takes breaks now and allows people to enter the conversation. So I think Avi is making personal improvements in his etiquette when we do these shows together. So okay, here we go. Technical issues. Audio slightly crackly, but production looks way better on your show than Avi's. I'll have a look at my my mic. I'll maybe adjust it a little bit, but let's see how we go. News from X and Grok. There we go. That's right, news from X and Grok. Well, that's where the news happens. I mean, despite what you might think about Elon Musk, X is where a lot of the news happens. All these news stories that you see these mainstream media outlets getting, they're actually stealing from people sharing it on X. A lot of the information comes through X first. Of course, mainstream publications still publish, their news stories from their sources, but we see a lot of breaking news on X. Just people's comments, Donald Trump making a comment, Elon Musk making a comment, whatever, just examples, it makes the news. And something like Grok, especially Grok 4, where it can, plug into the live internet, plug into X, see what the sentiment is, see what's trending, see what people are talking about, and bring all that together. I think this is, kind of the future. Whether we like it or not, there's benefits to AI. I know people think about things like, invasion of privacy and all this kind of stuff as well, but there are also benefits to AI, I think, for the news field in terms of collating information and gathering data. Here's a comment from Madeline. "I've just unfollowed Musk because I got sick of the schoolboy humor." Look, I know I'm deviating a little bit, but Elon Musk is, I think he's very entertaining. I like the memes. I follow him for the chaos. Very interesting character, obviously, very eccentric. Obviously, he's, he is the richest person in the world. He does not give a crap, and he says and does what he likes. So it does make for entertainment, but I understand that some people might not actually enjoy his humor. What else do we have here? I'll see what else comments I can bring up quickly before I start. Yeah, so Daniel's brought up here, hopefully you can address police accountability. I will be touching on some stories. Obviously, when I do these news stories, we do focus a lot on what's happening overseas, the United States of America and, Britain and things like this, because sometimes it's more interesting than Australian politics. I'm sorry to say, sometimes Australian politics is very dry and we kind of focus on what's going on overseas. But I really like to focus on Victoria and Melbourne as well, some local news and, a lot of the chaos that we see in our city of Melbourne, a lot of the interactions that people have with police. I know there's few big stories involving Victoria Police and involving the Victorian government as well. It's nothing new. There's always major stories involving those organisations, but things pertaining to stuff like childcare, people being abused. Obviously, we have a lot of violence, machete attacks, knife attacks. People can't even go to shopping centres these days in Victoria, right? It's very kind of dangerous and violent. And I think people, when I talk about it, they think I'm, using a lot of hyperbole. If I read the comments on my Facebook or X, some people accuse me of being very hyperbolic and exaggerating things. But no, I think it's quite dangerous now in Victoria to go to the shopping centre. Like, people can, literally stab you. They can run around with machetes. You can get harmed. It didn't used to be like this. Right, it didn't used to be happen like this, and I grew up in the southeast suburbs in Dandenong in the 90s, relatively a dodgy part of Victoria if you want to talk about crime statistics, and even there it wasn't like this, right? You can go to Dandenong Plaza and it was relatively safe. Now you go to kind of most your outer suburb shopping centres, and there's people stabbing each other and running around with machetes, and Victoria Police, they pretend to do things, the government pretends to do things, but I think everyone's kind of lost control. So I'll try to keep the comments in mind as well, the best that I can. Obviously, when I start focusing on the news stories, it's hard to keep up with things. But look, you can do a super chat if you want on YouTube, and it'll kind of highlight it to me, and I'll definitely see it. And then I'll get through it. I got to avoid reading the troll comments because it throws me off track. Here we go. Soulshine, you want to talk truth, Mossad? Look, today my Mossad handler is actually not here, so I will be free to say what I want to say. Mossad handler Avi Hebney is not here, so I can talk a bit more freely about anything you want me to talk about. Drop it in the comments and I'll see what you want me to know. I got our first super chat here from John. Solo Rukshan is the best Rukshan. All right, thanks, mate. Thank you. I believe that too, but it's a lot of fun doing with Avi. We have a lot of fun together. I think we make a good duo. It's always good to actually, when we're doing these podcasts, having someone else to talk to and bounce things off is, I think it's kind of makes it a bit more interesting sometimes, rather than me just blurting out my thoughts. There's some interesting comments there, but look, I'm going to jump into some of the news stories that I wanted to cover today, guys. So first up, one of the stories that's come out today is obviously this massive scandal in Victoria involving childcare centres. Now, childcare centres is one of those places where parents, just the way that our society is set up, almost have no choice sometimes, especially single mums or people where both family members, mum and dad, have to work, or different family arrangements. Most people have to go to work and do a job. Like, that's kind of how our system is set up. Like, you can't afford to have a house, you can't afford to do almost anything now if you're not working. Of course, if you're bludging and living off welfare, I'm not saying welfare is necessarily a bad thing, but if that's what you're doing, maybe those things might not matter to you. But most people that are working have to also consider looking after their children, and a lot of them will put them in childcare. Now, we've had this scandal come up over the last few weeks where we've been discussing this alleged pedophile, I think charged with about 70 sexual assault offences against 8 minor children. It's horrific stuff, especially when you consider that, it's a place that people send their kids to wanting their children to be safe. Like, you'd think it's a safe place. But over time, places like childcare, places like, the school systems have become increasingly dangerous. So the places that we think are the safest for children are increasingly becoming dangerous. And there's many reasons for that. But the latest update is that, there was all these childcare centres that this bloke had been to, where the parents had to get their children tested for STDs and just horrific stuff. But now there's an additional 4. So I'll just play that news story, and I'll talk about some of the police, what the police has been saying about it, and what the government has been saying about it as well. So let me just pull that up and see if I can get that playing with the audio and everything going properly.
For 800 more children are being urged to get tested for sexually transmitted diseases after police confirmed accused paedophile Joshua Brown worked at 4 additional childcare centres. Stephanie Anderson has been following these developments and joins us now. Steph, where are the new facilities?
Mickleham, Tarneit, Braybrook and Greensborough, Brett, and there's a lot of information and detail within this update that we've received from both Victoria Police and the Department of Health. So I'm going to step through it because I know a lot of families will be keen to hear those exact exact dates. Starting with the 4 new centres that have been added to the list. We've got Kids Academy Waratah Estate in Mickleham. Joshua Brown worked there on the 29th of August 2024. Milestones Early Learning in Tarneet. He worked there on the 10th of September and the 13th of September in 2024. Milestones Early Learning in Braybrook on the 4th and 6th of December 2024. And Milestones Early Learning in Greensborough on the 5th of December, the 31st of January this year and the 27th.
I just wanted to stop that there because these 4 centres have been additionally added as more people that have run into this guy or more parents that have seen this guy appear in videos have then put 2 and 2 together and said, hey, this guy was also at this childcare centre. And the police have kind of gone through backdated with talking to people and talking to other childcare centres and now put this full picture together. So hopefully this is it, because initially when all this evidence came out of where this guy had allegedly committed his pedophilic activities, his sexual assaults, there was only a limited number, and now we've had more added to it, which is I don't know if that speaks about the police investigation itself, whether it was thorough enough to begin with, or whether, it's just kind of how it is. But I think there needs to be a better way of keeping record of where people, especially people who are looking after children, are working. It should just be one system. You look it up and it registers every single centre that they've worked at. The fact that they've had to spend this time figuring that out kind of blows my mind. Let's keep playing.
Of February now this year. Now, we know that this is the latest in a very extensive investigation into this individual. Along with those new centres are new dates and details relating to some of the centres and facilities that were already on the list. We've got those on your screen there. Not only have dates been added, but some we believe have been removed as well. So it's really important that parents go through those details and families and see if any of them relate to them or their child. Now, we know investigators are working through a really significant volume of calls from families along with facility records to piece together where the accused pedophile worked. Along with adding new centres and changing dates of some existing, one centre has been removed, and this is important, from that list that's been put out by police and the Department of Health. That is the Papilio Early Learning Centre in Hoppers Crossing. There were previously a couple of dates relating to that one. It has now been removed from the list because they do not believe he worked there. Now, as it stands today, police believe Joshua Brown did work at 23 childcare centres between January 2017 and May 2025. Families who have been associated with these 4 new centres, along with all the ones previous, are being contacted directly by authorities, primarily by SMS if they do have a contact number within the system. That is the main source that police are managing and health department officials are reaching out to families via. So SMS is the key one for families to look out for. There'll also be, as you mentioned, precautionary testing recommended for around 800 children associated with those 4 new centres. Now, families wanting to access the full list and get more information on those dates should visit the website that was just on your screen there. There is also a dedicated advice line.
Anyway, you guys get the picture. Pretty horrific stuff, and the fact that parents have to now go test these children as well. It just boggles my mind that this is kind of what's happening at childcare centres, especially in such a prolific manner. There's other people linked to this as well. We've seen other instances of this. I think we had the childcare worker in Queensland. I think he was originally from Victoria as well, charged with 300 sexual assaults. So this is a problem that we're seeing in this industry. I know people have brought up things like, stopping men from working. There's other factors as well, perhaps, that, just the basic degeneracy of our society today, where we're teaching, hypersexualizing children in the school place. We're teaching children weird stuff on TV shows, especially in the state of Victoria. Like, there's a lot of these weird things going on where we have this kind of storybook hours and drag time this and all this kind of nonsense that we've been talking about for years now as potentially being a problem. And even as it relates to this individual, some people are bringing up these type of claims as well. Now, I don't want to get too much into that. What I want to say is it looks like there has been a breakdown in terms of catching this guy out early, because multiple people have now come out and said they've made complaints against this individual. that these things have not been taken, seriously in the sense of stopping him from working. They've just really kind of reviewed him, suspended him, allowed him to come back to work. Even issues around the working with children's check. So definitely, I think government is responsible for this. As more and more parents and families are impacted by this, again, the Victorian, taxpayers are going to be in the hook for this as well, because I do believe the parents actually have a solid case for a lawsuit against the state government and against, childcare centre providers. I'm not sure exactly how it'll work, but these people have been let down. These parents have been let down by the system. This is not just a case of an individual that got away with this for so long. There have been signs of this. People have caught on to this. People have tried to report him for suspicious behaviour or concerns that they've had, and he's gotten away with it for this long. And all these children now have been impacted. The state, to a state where they have to now go get STD tests. It's crazy, and this is happening more and more. And it's, I think, a degeneracy in society in general. There's a few other stories that I'm going to be covering today, which kind of goes to this degeneracy that we're seeing, this, very sick sexual perversion that we're seeing across Australia, and it's only getting worse and worse. I'd love to see in the comments what you think your thoughts are around why this is happening more and more, or is it just because we are catching on to these people more and more? So yeah, that's the first story. I'll try to get to some of the comments and see what people are saying. Madeline says it'll be good if they got something against the government. Yeah. I can say that in NDIS, no one listens to you. It doesn't matter if you report stuff over and over. There always seems to be loopholes in our modern kind of system of government and these institutions and authorities that seems to protect people. Like, they give people way too much of the benefit of the doubt. And historically, we've seen so many instances of vulnerable children being abused through institutions or lack of care by government. So why they still protect individuals, I don't know. Like, especially with the policies around this kind of inclusive diversity, DEI. Perhaps the best people aren't being hired for the job of looking after children. Like, there might be some signs that normally, that going back 20-30 years, people that would never have been hired for these type of job roles because of just their personalities, sorry to say, or just the manner in which they carry themselves, red flags would have gone up back then. Today, the people who are hiring these these agencies and things like this, I don't even think they're looking at it in that broad sense. They're just very openly inviting almost anyone to be around children. And I don't think that, works in our type of society. So let's have a look at some comments here. We got here from Gap Media. How can he get away with this for so long and no one noticed? Yeah, I think it's 23 childcare centres from 2017 to 2025. That's someone that's been to many different centres. And I know it's through an agency, so probably short-staffed. They put him somewhere and he goes there. But that's a long period of time for someone like that to get away with this type of activity. But that case that I was talking about in Queensland, that guy had been doing it for decades. I think he also went to Italy and he abused kids in Italy as well. And he was eventually caught. I think 300 cases of sexual assault against minors, against children in Australia and around the world. And he was sentenced to life in prison, and he's asking for a reduction in his sentence or some nonsense like this. Even this guy, maximum penalty, whatever we can do. I know people have suggested other penalties for this individual. Of course, the emotions are very high as this involves children. But, the book should be thrown at this individual. I don't know what the lawyers are going to say and all this stuff that's going to happen. Usually these days we see the mental health card or mental health problems. That's usually what they say. But I haven't heard anything like that yet. Failed police checks. Thanks for the comment. Comment from Spicy FM. There's always a cover-up for these shenanigans in institutions. They never learn. The fiasco with Trump proves that. People shouldn't be leaving their kids at childcare centres. I understand that sentiment, but I think you can't blame people and parents and families. Just the way that society is set up today in a country like Australia, like those support systems are not there sometimes for most people, especially when they start work and they have children. Now you can make all types of observations about what type of society leads to that, but that's kind of how it's become. So you can't necessarily blame people themselves. There should be a system there that's possible where children can be looked after. There's no 100% safe system when you leave your children with strangers, but at least the basic checks and balances, I think as a parent you would think the basic checks and balances are being done to protect children in these type of spaces. So Spicy FM, there will be an independent inquiry, high profile lawyers will get rich and nothing changes. That is generally what happens. Hopefully in this situation, because it involves children, I think everyone should take this very seriously. But I do understand that sentiment, because usually all these lawyers get involved, they put together a report. It takes years for the report to get put through. Then they argue about it. Some minor changes happen, and then repeat of the same thing happens a few years later. Really, if there's any one issue that Jacinta Allen should put 100% focus into getting right, forget her roads and forget all the other disastrous things that she's doing, like housing and all this kind of stuff, nonsense. At least this thing, protecting the most vulnerable in Victoria, the children, should be her number one priority when she gets back from holiday. 1984 Punk says, Rukshan, before I started school, my mother left me with a relative or a neighbor. Again, like, these setups sometimes just don't work in the modern Australian society. I know lots of, overseas, when I travel overseas, a lot of the times the grandparents or elder relatives that will look after the children. So there's an extra added layer there of safety because you're leaving it with family. Just the way that Australian society is set up, a lot of families, when they start their new life, they move out further away from their parents to buy property just because of the soaring property prices. And we can get into all of that as well, because there's other issues attached to that. But generally, that's what you see happening. So let me just go to, I'm just going to go to Grok and try to get the top news stories for Australia. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to use Grok, try to find out what the top news stories are. So none of this is planned. I'm not planning these stories or anything like this. It's just some stuff I have planned, but mostly it's going to be organic. And we'll try to see if I can. There we go. I already typed that before. So let's have a look what Grok gives us, and we'll go through these stories today. But again, guys, thanks for joining in to Rukshan on X. Opposition podcast is not happening tonight. Avi Yemeni is being very lazy. So I thought I'll start up my show again just tonight, just kind of start it up. Next week, we'll be back on Tuesday nights with the Opposition podcast. And of course, on Thursday as well, we'll have the Opposition podcast as well. But I might do more episodes of Rukshan on X, depending on how this goes. If you don't want to watch, don't watch. You can log off. If you want to come here and sulk and complain and troll me, go for your life. I'll definitely have a laugh or ignore it. If you get all abusive and start doing death threats and nonsense, I'll have to block you just because it's just too abusive, and the algorithm and things don't necessarily like people making death threats and serious things like this. But yeah, go for your life. I do not give a crap about your trolling. So I see some guys been going ham at me about just nonsense that I don't care about. Anyway, we'll let Grok do that search. While I'm doing that, there was another story that I shared yesterday. I just wanted to give an update on that. So this was a man that was wielding a knife, yelling Allah Akbar, who was arrested by citizens in Moonee Ponds in front of a shopping centre. So I think the victim that this individual stabbed, and a few other bystanders in front of this shopping centre jumped on this bloke after he had started to stab this individual. And then during the citizens' arrest, this individual was heard screaming Allah Akbar. And this made international news, actually. Like, there was a lot of people sharing this online, especially the clip of this individual yelling this, and the counter-terrorism police were involved, for instance, because, obviously screaming that term usually invokes some type of, terror-related incident, as, is commonplace in the West when that happens. So that was done. But the police have come back now and said that this is I'll actually read the police report. Let me read the police report, because they worded it in a very interesting way. All right, let's bring that up. There we go. Victoria Police. Man charged following Moonee Ponds stabbing. Moonee Valley Crime Investigation Unit detectives have charged a man following a stabbing in Moonee Ponds yesterday afternoon. It's alleged two male pedestrians were seen arguing before one of the men produced a knife and stabbed the other. The victim, a 44-year-old Essendon man, suffered minor injuries to his neck and chest and was taken to hospital for treatment. Passers-by and the victim restrained the alleged offender until police arrived a short time later. The 55-year-old Fitzroy man was taken into custody and has since been charged with recklessly cause injury, intentionally cause injury, and assault with a weapon. He has remanded to appear at the Melbourne Magistrates Court today. So he would have appeared today, but some of the other reporting, and I watched a live stream from the police in Moonee Valley, they were saying that this is an individual with mental health issues, and they don't believe this attack is religiously or motivated or an act of terrorism. He just happened to be yelling Allahu Akbar. So I just wanted to clear that up, because some people in my comments yesterday, they were telling me, Rukshan, why are you sharing this? Why are you telling us about what he was yelling and what he was saying? Well, at the time when I was sharing this information, all that context was, it was a developing story, as I've put here, developing. So just so you know, just to people accusing me of being racist, which is, there's nothing racist about describing exactly what happened. People shouldn't be going to shopping centres in Victoria or anywhere in Australia and being stabbed by people, and then the guy's yelling Allah Akbar. Obviously, that's reported as is. People will, of course, have different interpretations of that. But when more information becomes available, I'm happy to share that information. So the police say nothing to see here. The guy's a mental case. He's known to police, and apparently he was just yelling that because that's what he was doing. I don't think we'll hear anything else about this story and what transpired from any media or anything like that. This is that's it. I'll just get some of these comments. Oh, this is a cool comment. You were the photographer at my 21st. Great work with everything that you do. That would have been a long time ago. Photographing 21st. That would have been a very long time ago. Thanks. I hope you still enjoy those photos. Madeline says, did you see there were 2 knife attacks in Moonee Ponds same day reported in the Edge there? So there's another attack that same day in Moonee Ponds. Again, it's crazy because, now hearing about knife attacks in Victoria, hearing about knife attacks in Melbourne, people getting, stabbed with machetes or knives, whatever, is like commonplace, is like normal. One of the comments that I made on X last night when I shared the story was that it's not going to be long until leaders in our country, in Australia, get up and say, this is all just a part and parcel of living in a big city. Like, get used to it. Get used to this kind of, knife stabbings and, killings and potentially, terror attacks in the future. If you look at places like London, I'm quoting Sadiq Khan, if you look at places like New York and other places in America and Europe, this is commonplace now. And that is all that's left to do, because all that crime that's happening, all that violence that's happening, all those kind of terroristic things which are going on in the state of Victoria and around Australia is, things which aren't being stopped. You hear about it more and more and more. And the only thing that's left to do for our leaders is just to tell us, honestly, I'm not trying to be like, smart ass here. All that's left to do for them, this is the eventual end of all of this. It's just to tell us to put up with it. This is how things are now, and this is your life now. It already feels like that, but that's the future. And it's sad to say that, because this is not the Victoria or the Melbourne that I remember, and I've grown up in some shady parts of Victoria, and even then it wasn't like this. So it just sucks that this is what it's come to, unfortunately. I'm just going to pull up some more comments here. I might be stopping the comments from scrolling as well as I do this, but Mako B says, we should not normalize this behavior. He said Allah, etc. Where did that come from? Yeah, I mean, some cultures, it's true, some cultures, that is a common phrase that is said, especially within, Muslim, Islamic cultures. Some people just say that, how we say God bless you type thing, God is great, things like this. But obviously it's got the connotations attached to terror attacks in the West. Usually terror attacks, or when people are being, whether it's a good or bad things, when people say Allah Akbar, they say it for really celebratory things, or when they're wishing someone well, God is great. It's like Westerners or Christians saying God is great, so or Christ is king. It's like a phrase like this. But the problem is, a lot of the times when these, fundamental Islamists and terrorists and stuff commit crimes against individuals, like these terror crimes, they are also yelling that same phrase. So in the West, especially, it's been associated with this, and it's so impossible now to disassociate it from terrorism, unfortunately. Sam says, we need to stop the mental health get out of jail free card. That is the most common thing that we're seeing. So it seems like there's lots of, from every single crime that we hear from police, they will be like, it's known to us, this person, and they got mental health issues. So, again, I'm not trying to be a smartass, but it seems like there's just lots of crazy people out there walking around, and everyone knows about it. Drew says, alternatively, the leaders will crack down on crime by implementing brick brother technologies and surveillance. Yes, that is unfortunately going to come as well. Actually, I'll talk about that towards the end as well, because, we are turning into this surveillance style state, at least with our online surveillance by the government, where they want to, make us, I think, verify our age or sign up to, Google and things like this. So it's insane. But next story, guys, that I wanted to talk about was this one again. I had a lot of comments on this on my Facebook. People got, worked up at me for, either sharing this story, saying that is fake news, or not committing enough to, my disagreement, or showing enough disagreement with what the Trump administration is doing. But this carries on the same thing, of course. We're talking about child sex abuse, people being sex trafficked, human trafficking. Very crazy world that we live in. But this is perhaps the biggest case in terms of, our generation, where this is being discussed. And obviously with the Trump administration not 100% committing, as it stands right now, to releasing, the so-called files in the list, it's thrown everything into a bit of a tizzy, because, MAGA people who are massive supporters of Donald Trump, who say that they voted for him 100% purely based on getting these files released, are not very happy. So there's been some developments in all of this. This one here, Maxwell prepared to speak to Congress. This was reported yesterday by the Daily Mail, and I shared that as well, that, the Maxwell character, who's the only person that's in jail, because obviously Epstein was suicided himself, whatever you want to look. It's a whole basket of worms that I don't want to get into, but Maxwell is in there. She's the only person that's been convicted of anything. Apparently her lawyers and her team are trying to get her sentence reduced, or they want to cooperate, because she never got a plea deal. A part of that is that she wants to speak to Congress. And there's so many people now focusing on this case since Donald Trump said that there's nothing to see here. That's triggered almost everyone, from Donald Trump supporters, MAGA supporters, and also the Democrats. The Democrats who are in power now during the Biden administration. Fair enough, the dude had dementia and probably wasn't running anything, but the Democrats during that time had access to all of this under their administration, their DOJ, their FBI. Nothing was released, right? Nothing was released by the Democrats. But all of a sudden, when Trump's showing a bit of hesitation, whatever you may think of it, now the Democrats want to see the files. So they actually filed a motion in one of their houses of government today. So I'll go through that with you guys while I check out some of your comments as well. So let me just pull up those videos, because it's so interesting to see the Democrats now be the ones who are demanding the release of the files. Like, seriously, these people are deranged. I don't think they care whatsoever about any of it. But I'm going to show you this guy. His name is Rukshan. He is not my uncle, but I'm going to play his video. He's a Democrat, and this is the bill or the motion that he put through to get the files released. Let's have a listen in.
Mr. Speaker, I introduced today an amendment demanding the full release of the Epstein files. The Speaker's Rules Committee should demand a vote tomorrow of every member of Congress. Yes, we should release it, or no, we should not. This is a question of whose side are you on? Are you on the side of protecting the rich and the powerful who've put their thumb on the scales of government to suck out millions of dollars while working class Americans suffer? Or are you on the side of the people? The Attorney General said on her desk was the Epstein file. And now she's saying, no, nothing to see, don't release it. This is a question of trust. We need to release the Epstein files so we can restore government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And every member of Congress tomorrow should be forced to vote on this amendment. Mr. Speaker, I introduced...
Yeah, so that was the motion put forward by this Democrat member. And again, look, some people are like, yeah, this is what needs to happen. But again, remember, the Democrats were there for years in power. These people weren't talking about this. All that was being brushed aside. Now, all of a sudden, they're talking about justice and, people need to see transparency and all this nonsense. These people are two-faced. Honestly, it's two-faced. I think they're playing a massive game. And some of what Trump said, potentially, I had a view on this that, one of the reasons might be that in those 4 years, like Trump said, these files have been in the hands of Biden and these dodgy Democrats for all that time. Of course, they're going to try to tamper with things to make it inconvenient or make it more muddied, put Trump in a compromising position, perhaps, or some of the other administration, whatever. Now, people are saying none of that matters. Let it all out. Let's be transparent. Trump promised the most transparent government ever. He ran on this, and he didn't actually run on this. He just talked about it a lot. But you cannot trust these Democrats. And interestingly, what kind of optics-wise this works for the Democrats. I think this is kind of a blunder by the Trump administration, because now it's being reported that the Republicans in that House actually voted against the release of the file. So let's have a listen to how that went down, because the Republicans did actually shut down this motion.
Breaking news: the Republican-controlled House Rules Committee has just voted to block the release of the Epstein files. Joining us now, the member of Congress who forced that vote, Democratic Congressman Rukshan of California. Congressman, kind of give us the latest situation with the House Rules Committee.
Well, it's very disappointing. I had a very simple amendment that the full Epstein files should be released. It went for a vote to the House Rules Committee. Jim McGovern, who is the ranking member for House Democrats, made sure that all 4 Democrats voted for the release. Ralph Norman, a Republican, actually joined with the Democrats, saying that there should be a vote on the full release. Chip Roy didn't show up for the vote, but 7 other Republicans blocked it. So as of now, there is going to be no vote tomorrow, up or down vote on whether the Epstein files should be released.
And this was the first stage of your attempt to get a full vote by the House of Representatives, to see a full recorded vote. Everyone could see how their member of Congress voted on this issue. And that's what was blocked by the Rules Committee, not allowing you to get to that stage on the floor. Why would it be important to have that recorded vote on the floor?
Well, in a very simple way, we should see whose side are you on. That's really what this Epstein file issue has become. It's not just about knowing who's being protected, the rich and the powerful, in terms of who had interaction with Jeffrey Epstein. It's the sense that people have that the government is too beholden to certain interests who have their thumb on the scale, and that they're not working for ordinary people. And what the Democrats are saying is, we want to make sure that we get full justice here, that we get full transparency. And this may have been the first attempt that was blocked, but I'll tell you, it's not going to be the last attempt. We already have Representative Vesey, who has a resolution. Leader Jeffries is saying that we're going to push for transparency here. And we can keep introducing these kind of amendments every week, every month, to force the Republicans to demand the release. And this is something that many Republicans believe should happen, as was evidenced by Ralph Norman's vote.
Yeah, so as you can see, these Democrats, I mean, they would never... They didn't talk about this at all during the Biden administration. Now, all of a sudden, this guy's talking about transparency, and they're going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing. It's just all this TDS nonsense, right? This is all about Trump. It's all about making, it uncomfortable for the Republicans. I personally think at the moment that the fact that they, aren't playing the Democrats' games and they've, blocked it as such, even though optics look bad, you can't let the Democrats, these kind of dubious people control this entire narrative if you're in the Trump administration and if you support, what the Trump administration is doing. Because, what they're playing is a totally different political game. And I think, they're trying to politicize it even more. Now, Trump through one of his surrogates, I guess through Lara Trump, his daughter, has come out and said that they are actually going to release more information and more files. So whether that's the pressure that's been put on, or there was always some things that could be released, or they're just releasing tidbits to make people stop complaining, because it seems to be what all people are talking about right now in terms of the number one issue happens to be these Epstein files, whereas Trump wants to look at the rest of his agenda. Well, everyone wants to know about where these files are, and it's really become a test of his government. So Lara Trump, one of his daughter-in-laws, was recently on a podcast or a show with Benny Johnson, and she actually talked about this. So I don't know what they're going to release, but here's what she had to say.
Given this back and forth, we're just coming off of. What would be your advice? Given this back and forth, we're just coming off of Turning Point here in Tampa. This was the topic of conversation. What would be your advice in order to take the temperature down on this issue from within the administration?
Well, I do think that there needs to be more transparency on this. And I think that will happen. I mean, look, I don't know what truly exists there, but I know that this is something that's important to the president as well. He does want transparency on all these fronts, that everything we're talking about, because it's frustrated him as well. He sat for 4 years like the rest of us did and saw lie after lie and saw our country just being sent down the wrong path. And it was really frightening and very upsetting to a lot of people to see. And I would actually say over the past 10 years, we've all kind of endured this. Prior to that, it was probably happening, Benny, but we just weren't as aware of it. It wasn't until Donald Trump came down that golden escalator that he just kind of blew the doors off of everything, and people started to wake up and realize, wait a minute, things are not as they have always been presented to us. And I do believe that you will see that. Now, as it relates to the president, I know that this is probably not his number one thing he's focused on. He's focused on a lot of other important things. We've got this big announcement with Russia going on, I think, as we're speaking right now at the White House. We have, a Middle East, we're trying to get peace over there. We're trying to make sure that Iran's nuclear arsenal is obviously completely decimated. We want to make sure everything is on the right track for this country. Fortunately, you've seen no border crossings in the last month. 0, by the way. I think that's incredible. No one's talking about that enough. 0 illegal border crossings in the month of June. Amazing how that's all gone. So I don't know that this was top of mind for him, but he hears all the noise and he hears all of the consternation out there. And I think he's going to want to set things right as well. So I believe that there will probably be more coming on this. And I believe anything that they are able to release that doesn't, damage any witnesses or anyone underage or anything like that, I believe they'll probably try to get out sooner rather than later because they hear it and they understand it. So hopefully we see that happen sooner than later. And I guess that would be my advice. But to everybody else.
So yeah, that's Lara Trump there speaking to Benny Johnson and saying that there's more stuff coming. So obviously there's been rumblings and talking about this. Dan Bongino, Kash Patel in the Trump administration, the FBI director, and the deputy. They weren't very happy about how Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, handled all of this, and a lot of people were calling for her to be fired. And Trump kind of got in between all of that and said, no, forget about it. We got to move on. And I think that really pissed a lot of people off and, drove up the suspicion scale very high in terms of what's being hidden, which is all fair enough. I understand, I think, from Trump's perspective as well, getting on with the agenda. Like, this has been going on for a long time. Yes, he said that, he's going to release all these things. Now it looks like, he's claiming anyway that it's being compromised by the Democrats. Again, the only people that have really seen this material are those agents that have worked on the case, the judges and the lawyers, as well as obviously the Trump administration, key players in the Trump administration. So, everyone else is speculating. I don't want to get too far into the speculation around Jeffrey Epstein, who he was working for, and all these kind of discussions which are happening right now. And people can make of that whatever they will. But at the end of the day, I understand Trump's position that he doesn't want to get tied up in this for the next 3 years because he only has three years, right, of his administration left to get his agenda through. And you can see the Democrats kind of scratching at this. They want this to become something big to engulf Trump, to engulf his administration, so they can spend the next year or two really tying him up with this Epstein stuff. That's kind of what they're trying to make it into. So I think Trump is trying to manage this. The team's trying to manage this. I don't know what they're going to put out, obviously. And even if they do put out some more information, I don't think people are going to be happy. Even if the whole thing was put out, there's always going to be suspicion and conspiracy about what's being left out, right? It's going to be about, why is this redacted? Why is this name hidden? Why is this, list not complete? Who's been taken off the list? Do you think people are ever going to be happy with this case and with whatever information is released? No, there's always going to be some type of conspiracy now related to this. This is our generation's big conspiracy. I think 30, 40 years from now, maybe another president like Donald Trump will come around and maybe release it like how he released the JFK files when everyone's dead and gone and none of this means anything. But I know people want justice, people want justice, and it's very serious crimes that these people are accused of. Someone in the comments earlier said, what's Ghislaine Maxwell, what's she in jail for if none of this happened? Well, specifically the charges that are related to her is trafficking to Epstein himself. There's all this other, outside stuff that's related to that, but that's not specifically what she's in jail for, just to answer that question. But yeah, let's have a look at the comments. Thanks, guys, for the comments. YouTube, Facebook, and X comments do show through here, and I can go through and bring some of them up. You can also do super chats on YouTube if you want to. That's available there as well. I'll definitely see those comments, but let's have a look. Use Grok to sum up how Epstein went from normal person to a billionaire. It's fascinating. Well, I won't do that today, but anyone else can go on Grok and use it. I've found that these AI models that are consuming all this different, information from people that are, putting up articles, news stories. Sometimes when it comes to conspiracies, people will take, depending on how you ask the AI the question, it'll give you an answer based on the way that you structure your question that kind of fits the answer that you want to get, is kind of what I'm trying to say, because there's so many different variations of this topic being discussed on news stories and blogs and on X. So there's a massive volume of information around this with differing opinions. So the AI can kind of, I don't think it gives you the exact answer, because some people are sharing answers from Grok and other AI models and saying, see, even the AI knows what happened. I don't think it quite works like that. Evan says, pedophiles run the system and they're being protected. Yeah, look, there is truth to this notion that people are being protected. There must be interest there, which, people are named, or perhaps individuals that they know potentially may have been blackmailed. But they might not have the full, suite of evidence on that individual to get them on a crime. You saw with, what's his name? The one person that we really know about in this case, that there's been a lot of evidence in the public sphere at least, is Prince Andrew. And even that guy, right, besides being, taken off his royal duties by Queen Elizabeth, what's really happened to him? He's done some shoddy interview. Yeah, he's kind of disgraced in the public eye, but nothing criminal. There's been no charges against him. Nothing's happened to him. He's almost untouchable. And that's the thing, when you get into these kind of business people or politicians or judges, whoever's involved in knowing that guy in a dubious way, what are they going to do? The first thing when the government or someone brings up their name in a list, they're going to lawyer up, they're going to sue everyone, they're going to sue the government. You got to be prepared to have enough evidence on these people to make it stick, because if you're going to be in the business of putting out names out there just of an individual that had a lot of associates, Donald Trump was one of his associates, he's a guy pushing money around. People are saying he was some type of agent trying to blackmail people. Well, then he's trying to get into lots of people's lives, and not everyone would have accepted him. A lot of people would have rejected him, but who knows what he tried to do around those people. So all these people's lives will be in the spotlight as well. And the way that the world works is that all of these people will be called pedophiles, child molesters, and be linked to this, but they will all fight back through the legal system, and it will be decades and decades of litigation and fighting the US government for ruining their lives, they will say. And it'll be very hard for the government to prove what happened in that instance if there is not concrete evidence of them committing a crime. The fact that there was some messages or something dubious, again, I'm speculating. I don't know what there is. If there's concrete tapes and they're holding as blackmail and leverage over people, yeah, that should be made public, and these people should be held accountable for what they did. But if it's speculative evidence, then it's a can of worms that you're opening. Maconomics says the only person in jail for this is Ghislaine Maxwell, and all evidence is suppressed, dodgy as. Yeah, I mean, the suppression of evidence sometimes comes from the court system as well. John Brown says the Queen made sure nothing happened to Andrew because Charlie would have been dragged into it. Yeah, definitely Andrew was, protected by the British royal family. I mean, that would have been just a massive, massive scandal for a royal to be implicated in such a way where there was concrete case or something put against him, and they went all the way to a court, and just like it could have, really impacted the royal family. So whether he was, guilty or whatever, they want to protect him regardless. And a lot of these people are like that. Whether they're guilty or not, the systems around these type of people will try to protect them. And the lawyers that they have, they will use the system against the government as well. Like, this is not just a matter of putting out a list and putting out this evidence and then everything's done. I don't think that's how it works. I don't know why people are thinking like this thing just gets released and then all these people get arrested. That's not how the world works, and I don't think it works like this in this way as well. Thanks, David. Rukshan, your beard is suave. I actually need to go have a haircut and do a shave, so it's becoming uncomfortable for me slowly. Gearhead Boris says, I thought we had spy agencies that we pay to quietly take these people out. Where are my taxes going? Yes. Madeline says, Musk said Trump was on the we have something on the list. He might have been there for anything slightly compromising, Stormy Daniels, etc. The same might apply to others on the list. Again, I think Elon Musk is just being just a bit of a smartass in that instance. Trump really, insulted him about talking about SpaceX cutting contracts and all these things, right? So I think Elon Musk was a bit offended, and then he went on a rant about, Trump's on the list, just like being a jackass, because he can. And obviously everyone's going to pay attention to it and it's going to piss off Trump as well. But if you look at the Elon Musk and Trump relationship, just yesterday, Elon Musk is the Grok, right? We're talking about Grok. Grok signed a contract with the Pentagon for $200 million US. Grok for Government. It's a new application that Grok has developed through Elon Musk, their company, and it's a suite of AI products that are powered by Grok for governments to use internally. So we're seeing this kind of public fight between Elon Musk and Donald Trump, and all this kind of back and forth between them, and Musk starting a new party and all this kind of stuff. But at the same time, he's getting massive contracts from the US government and the Pentagon, of all places. So a lot of it feels like a show between those two to distract everyone else as well. I don't like to believe in those type of conspiracies, but it does feel like Trump and Musk are playing us all for fools with this little public fight that they have to distract people. I don't think either of them actually really care about what they're saying about each other. 1984 Punk said the Virginia Gulfrey story is another cover-up by the establishment. The timing is all obviously suspicious. She died this year as well. That all looks suspicious. Look, I'm not going to say that there's nothing suspicious going on around this. Almost everything related to this is suspicious. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's become very politicized. It's also become, something that's not been handled well by either administration, especially the Trump administration. Epstein died during Trump's presidency the first time around. Obviously, they released a video of the jail cell that had, it was edited in Premiere Pro. There was a minute missing, apparently, right? They say that's just how it is, but there was a minute missing. So all these things are making people question, and I understand the hesitancy that people have to just believe what the government is telling you, even if it's Donald Trump. Even if it's Donald Trump, it doesn't mean that the administration and the people involved in the background are not involved in somehow trying to massage this story in a way that, the public doesn't really get the full truth, right? It's become an inconvenient story. When you're in the opposition, when you're running against, like what the Democrats are doing now, right? What the Democrats are doing now, asking Trump for the Epstein files, is exactly what Trump was doing to them when he was running against them for the election. So it's become this political football, and it would be great to have it put to bed. right? It would be great, because it's crazy when you go on X, when you're talking about anything, all people talk about is this file list. They'll talk about this file list, they'll talk about Israel, Mossad, it just goes on and on and on. It would be great just to have it all out in the public, and then people can make up their own minds. Like, I would much prefer that, but that's not how the world works sometimes. Abby King, thanks for the super chat, Abby. Thanks for joining again. You always jump in on the Opposition podcast as well, so and support us with your super chats. Avi will be very interested to see that you're doing just a super chat during my show. He might have a complaint about this later. Abby says, hi Rukshan, late to join tonight. It's all good. I've just been yapping on about the same old. Funny how Virginia Godfrey passed away after tweeting she's not suicidal. I don't remember the exact timeline if that actually happened, but if that did happen, like you said it happened, obviously a lot of eyebrows would have been raised. Now let's just quickly go back to I was going to Grok using AI. We're talking about Grok, but I was using AI to get the top 10 stories for Australia from X, right? So honestly, with these tools and stuff, yes, I can do a show, I can prepare and look through these stories, but most of the day I'm on these platforms and involved in researching and looking at a lot of these stories and commenting about it. So I know the gist of many stories, but I thought it'd be interesting just to go to Grok and ask it for the top 10 stories, and without any kind of planning or anything, we'll just go through the stories and see what they're talking about. So this is according to Grok what Australians are talking about on X. Tax reform debate in Australia. Australians are divided on tax reform, with many advocating for changes but reluctant to bear the cost themselves. Chief business correspondent Ian Veranda argues that true reform requires shared responsibility rather than shifting the burden. So that, I think, was related to this news that came out. I'll just unblur my screen. Give me a second. This news that came out, which was the Labor government was advised by the Treasury, right? Apparently after the election, if you believe the reporting of the ABC, according to documents obtained via Freedom of Information, the Department of Treasury advised the Albanese government that tax increases would be required to meet its election promises and budget objectives. The documents also reveals that Labor's housing policy is not achievable. Some of the information was revealed accidentally, and the Department of Treasury requested documents be deleted. So during this Freedom of Information from the ABC, they received a bunch of documents from the Treasury Department, and some of the headlines and some information was redacted when it shouldn't have been. And upon seeing the error, the Department of Treasury asked ABC to delete the Freedom of Information document, but the ABC went ahead and released it anyway. And the document shows that the Labor government was advised, apparently after the election, that a lot of the policies that they've been putting forward, especially around housing, would require them to increase taxes, right? Introduce taxes or increase taxes on the Australian public. Now, no one, of course, should be surprised by any of this. No one should be shocked by this, because this is usually what happens after an election. They make all these crazy promises, then they'll say, "Oh, we're not going to raise this tax or raise that tax." But lo and behold, afterwards they get some advice, and it's like, "Yeah, we have to do it based on the economic conditions. We think this is the smart thing to do," and that's the discussion that's going on right now. And I do think this release of these documents, this story by the ABC, and some of the other stories you've seen come out now about super and things related to the tax system, is about softening the blow and preparing Australians for what's coming from Labor, which is increased taxes or some type of burden on the rest of the population to help them with their programs, right? And I'm not going to get into the weeds about that today on this, but I think that's what Grok was referring to, and I had this already open because this is one of the stories that I shared yesterday as well. Number 2 story, additional childcare centres linked to alleged pedophile. So we already covered that story. So there you go, Grok's done a good job. This is a feel-good story. Posthumous Victoria Cross awarded to Vietnam War hero. Private Richard Norden has been honoured with the Victoria Cross for his bravery during the Vietnam War, 57 years after his death in combat. Would be a very proud moment for this private's family to have his service and his valour recognised, even so long after his service. But that's a story that you guys can look up if you're interested. It's always good to see a feel-good story. Federal court rules no duty of care on climate for Torres Strait Islanders. The federal court has determined that the Commonwealth does not owe a legal duty to protect Torres Strait Islander people from climate change impacts or fund adaptation efforts. That feels like a feel-good story as well. Good on the federal court. I did not know about this story, so let's have a read of this. Court finds no duty of care owed to Torres Strait Islanders over climate change. I mean, it sounds like common sense if you ask me. The federal court has found that Commonwealth does not owe a duty of care to Torres Strait Islander people to protect them from impacts of climate change or fund adaptation measures. Judge Michael Wigney ruled Australia's greenhouse gas emissions targets are matters of core government policy which should not be decided by Parliament, not the courts. Should be decided by Parliament, not the courts. My heart is broken for my families and my communities. Goda Mullah, legal traditional owner uncle Pubby said after the decision was handed down. This sounds like a shakedown. This sounds like this particular group in the Torres Strait Islander was trying to shake down the Australian public for some extra money through this climate change agenda that we're seeing by going after the government, saying that they owe a duty of care to protect the islands from climate change. The judge also rejected the Torres Strait Islanders' claim that the cultural loss should be compensated under negligence law. He said he had considerable sympathy for the uncle's argument that cultural loss was compensable, but did not consider it open to him as a single judge to recognize it in law for the first time. I don't know if this is the end of this story, but that's quite interesting how, the courts are being used. This other issue that we have, climate change, now is becoming an issue for Indigenous people to go after the government about, saying that if you don't tackle, because of your inaction on climate change or whatever, it's ruined our culture. It's ruining our, in this case, Torres Strait Islanders, whatever, maybe the sea levels rising, I don't know. And, we need money from you. That's pretty much what's happening there. Story number 5 of what's trending in Australia. Probe into Air India pilot's mental health records. Investigators are examining the medical records of Air India pilot killed in a crash following the reports of depression and other mental health issues. That's interesting. Australian journalist detained briefly in Beijing. So, what's his name? Our great Prime Minister, Mr. Albanese, is in China, of course, and a lot of controversy around this visit, namely because he hasn't met with our great ally in President Donald Trump first. He's run off to Beijing. He's had trouble securing a meeting with Donald J. Trump, and there's a lot of things that we can attribute that to. I think the main barrier there is Kevin Rudd, even though no one wants to admit that Kevin Rudd, as the ambassador for the United States of America in Australia, Australian ambassador in the US, is problematic. I don't think the Trump administration likes him from all the reporting that I've seen, and they might be punishing Albanese, but I don't think our government's tried enough to really get that meeting set up with Donald Trump. And of course, Beijing being Albanese's preferred place, a destination, he'd probably live there if he could and rule Australia from there. There's been videos of him strolling around Beijing with his security and people coming up to him and things like this. Some bewildered faces as well of the Chinese population looking at this guy like, who is this guy? Because he doesn't really, carry the stature or the demeanor of a leader. But it turns out that security guards in Beijing attempted to prevent Australian journalists from leaving a tourist site with footage ahead of Prime Minister Anthony Albanese's meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Let's have a look.
Local authorities, they are surrounding the Australian press after we filmed our initial piece to cameras. They're saying that we can't leave the area, and they're also asking if they can take our camera equipment. It's just a really febrile situation here in Beijing. It's very hard to work out what we've done wrong, but the local authorities are clearly quite upset with us. We had paperwork giving us permission to film here. So after that group had surrounded us, it does appear that we are now able to board the bus, and this group who've been taking photos of us and who were initially saying we could not leave now seem to have stepped aside. You can see behind me the local authorities.
Well, welcome to China. This is the reality of China. And I think sometimes these woke journalists kind of pretend that it's not like this either. But this is our biggest trading partner and all these kind of things that Albanese says our friend in the region is this authoritarian state. But having said that, we did see the parts of Australia and Victorian government, for instance, during COVID, turn on the media in the same way. So This is what it's like. So this journalist obviously is complaining about the way that they were treated, but this is what you expect from the communist state of China, who are so used to controlling everything. And Albanese, of course, as the Australian leader, the Prime Minister going there could have made it very easy for the media, Australian media, to do the job of covering this. And, if the Beijing actually respected Australia, you think they'd be hounding Australian journalists with the correct permission to be there? No. Clearly, they have no respect for Australia, and they're treating these journalists just the way that they treat their own journalists. Someone brought here, she got it traced of the true China. That's it. And look, China, let's forget about the government and the system of government and the laws and the regulation stuff. It is a country that's doing fairly well in terms of its expansion into within the country itself, the way that it's growing, its growing economy, and also within the region itself. Like this is an economic powerhouse, and it makes sense for Australia to have relationship with China because in the region it is our biggest export partner. So all of this stuff makes sense. It's just that Albanese, the way that he carries himself, doesn't necessarily. I don't think it necessarily, it does favors for Australia in terms of how he views our relationship with China. I think he is beholden to Xi in a way that doesn't necessarily always benefit us. There he is with his photo with Xi Jinping. What else? Is there any other photos of Albanese there? Yeah, what do you guys think of Albo in China? We've got another super chat. I'm going to bring that up from Gap Media. Thanks for the super chat. Are they really surprised it's China? Please. Yeah, I don't know why the media is acting so surprised that in China there would be restrictions around media coverage. That's kind of what you would expect. China almost has less freedom of speech than the UK. Yeah, I mean, look, why are we bad-mouthing China? That's true. When you look at the UK and even Australia, like with the kind of the hate speech laws and the things that they're bringing in, we're kind of almost there. China is just way ahead, and maybe Albanese will get some ideas while he's there. And interestingly, a few weeks ago, Albanese actually met Daniel Andrews, who's also notorious for going to China without anyone else around, with no media, and on these secret trips. He met him for, I think, lunch or something in Victoria, and now a couple of weeks later, he's in Beijing. So all these Labour guys, Andrews, Albanese, they love China. They'll get on their knees for China, pretty much. And what we're worried about in Australia is, are they selling us out? Right? Are they selling out Australia? And someone like me, you're looking at generally what happens, would feel uncomfortable about the way that this is playing out. I would much prefer Australia to be in the Western sphere of influence in terms of the Anglosphere, with the United States of America, our traditional partners, our traditional allies. But I think Albanese has really screwed that up to an extent by the decisions that he's made. Obviously Kevin Rudd, like I mentioned earlier, but many other things as well. I think his tone, just the disrespect perhaps he has towards the Trump administration over a long period of time, which is documented, is stopping this relationship from happening. And I think Albanese is terrified. Anthony Albanese, I think, is terrified of being in the Oval Office, not the Oval Office, sorry, that briefing room that they have, the press room in the White House where the two leaders sit side by side on those chairs. You've seen it with Trump and Zelensky before, where Trump is, kind of shaking down Zelensky. Albanese is terrified, I think, of the optics. If him and Trump were together and Trump were to, badmouth Kevin Rudd or to have a go at Albanese or say something like this, I think that would just be Albanese. He would just go flustered. He would go red, and he'd just be, humiliated, I think, in Australia. So he wants to avoid that. Maybe he's trying to iron out the relationship before he meets him. Maybe this going to China is to show the Trump administration, hey, look, if you guys don't come to us, we're going to go see the Chinese. Who knows? I just don't think it's a good look. Rukshan's home country has been bought by China. So yes, the country of my heritage, Sri Lanka. Many ports in Sri Lanka. I don't know too much about Sri Lankan politics, but the Belt and Road that we keep hearing about, well, they were deep in Sri Lanka, China, in the Belt and Road, because they really want to secure those ports and stuff in Sri Lanka because it's a fantastic location in the Indian Ocean. And what's happened since, I'm not exactly sure of that deal. Obviously, Sri Lanka's had a restructuring after some turmoil as well. when I did recently go there for a holiday, massive Chinese investment in Sri Lanka. You're seeing these massive skyscrapers, massive hotels. I'm guessing it's built by the Chinese. The roads, everything's built by the Chinese. The port, I believe, is still getting built by the Chinese. Lots of Chinese tourists in Sri Lanka. So there is a massive relationship. And China would love nothing more than to exert their influence over the region, right? This includes Australia. And Australia, yes, I think the only thing that Australia has going for itself is it's such a big country. Obviously, it's got a lot of resources, and the fact that it's from the Western sphere of influence. Some of these other countries like Sri Lanka don't stand a chance. I mean, the same population as Australia. Luckily, Australia has these resources and things to perhaps have a more of an even playing field with China. But yeah, rest of Asia, they're taking advantage of as best as they can. Arthur Morgan says, if they actually bring in hate speech laws, I'm going to prison. Yeah, but I think a lot of us are worried about how these laws, would be applied. I'm hearing about a register as well, online database for hate speech. Chinese buildings are built so poorly. Yes, a lot of the time when I was driving in the, I wasn't driving, but I was being driven around on the Sri Lankan highways that were built by the Chinese. Pretty much all the Sri Lankan drivers were complaining just about how poor the roads are, because I noticed it. The roads have becoming, over time with the heat, perhaps it wasn't built probably for the conditions, they become bumpy. So there's lots of like different gradients, I guess. And also when it rains, the roads kind of flood, the water doesn't dissipate. So a lot of people there in Sri Lanka actually blame poor Chinese construction, which I found interesting. Spicy FM says it's really speech you hate laws. Yeah, definitely agree. That's what it sounds like sometimes. All right, let's keep going with the top stories. Grok's great. So they gave us the journalist story. I think this is the future, right? We're going to replace mainstream journalism, right? 7, young go-kart races rapid rise. 10-year-old Mina Price has quickly become a standout in go-kart racing. Well, I've never done a sport article before, but thanks to Grok, we know there's a rapid rise. 1/3 of young Australian workers underpaid. A report reveals that about 1/3 of young workers in Australia earn less than $15 per hour, nearly $10 below the minimum wage. And number 9, Trump pledges weapons to Ukraine and tariffs on Russia. US President Trump has vowed to send billions in weapons to Ukraine and impose secondary tariffs on Russia. Russia's partners if no deal is reached within 50 days. Now, again, this is another one of those things where Trump is, I would say, from what he talked about before the election to how he's talking now, this is something that he's, I think, struggling with in terms of the way that he carried himself before the election. He was like, when I get voted in, I'm going to go in there, going to tell Vladimir and Zelensky, it's over, war's done, I'll finish it straight away. Well, it's been months and months since Trump has gone into power, and obviously that's not happened. And now he's given Moscow 50 days to end the 40-month-old war, this says. So, and a part of that now is, he dressed down Zelensky a few months ago in the White House when Zelensky came for weapons, but now Trump is, handing over weapons to Ukraine. And obviously people are calling it out. A lot of people support, a lot of the neocons, a lot of the people that kind of support this US arms industry are very happy with this decision. But many people, including Trump supporters, are calling him out for the way that he's handling this situation. Sorry, I'm just going to keep this very casual. I don't want to get too serious and bogged down in news as well. I want to read the comments. I just saw Rukshan is the fastest Camry driver in Australia. I've never driven a Camry. Even being of my heritage and my background, I've never driven a Camry in Australia, from what I can tell. So there you go. I am very, very Australian. They haven't got me. They didn't get me onto the Camry. If I got into the Camry, I would be probably, less Australian. This is from Crunchy. Rukshan fan, have you seen or heard about Airbus Albo is joining us to the WHO? Yeah, so the WHO decision happened ages ago. It's just, I think it's becoming, going into effect in a couple of days. But that happened a long time ago. I believe there was bipartisan support from memory when it happened. And yeah, this Australian government loves having these third parties to defer to, right? Trump, first thing he did he took America out of the WHO when he won the election. Took him out of this kind of Paris climate stuff and all this nonsense, right? He would take them out of the UN completely if he couldn't use that as a forum to influence other countries and dictate terms to others, right? He would get out of that as well. But he got America out of the WHO, and Australia, I feel like whether it's Labor or Liberal, they like having that that outside body where they can turn to the public and say, hey, look, it's not us imposing these things on you. We're just following the WHO directions, and we're a signatory to this treaty or whatever. It's our obligations. We're going to honor them. We've signed up to this, and that's why we have to, mandate everything and lock you guys down and do all this, right? That's kind of the way that the Australian system works, where no one wants to be accountable or responsible. Whereas Trump is like, nah, stuff the WHO. We're in charge of our, health in this country. We're going to make Maha and put, John F. Robert Kennedy in there, and go from there. So it's not happening here. We don't have that system. So unfortunately, I don't think anyone's going to be taking us out of the WHO anytime soon. Madeline says both NATO, Zelensky, and Putin want to fight. So instead, Trump is monetizing the battle he can't stop. That's an interesting observation. Lyndon says the high-rises that came down in the recent earthquake in Thailand was built by the Chinese, supposed to be earthquake-proof. Thai police have arrested some Chinese men. Ongoing investigation. Yeah, that was, these massive new buildings that were built that just kind of crumbled. I know some of the buildings were kind of being finished, like they were still in construction when they came down, but I do remember seeing a tower that was swaying with a pool and the bridge kind of snapped or whatever. And so you're saying there were Chinese constructions as well. Luckily, we're in Sri Lanka, as far as I know, it's on an earthquake zone as such. But it is interesting that a lot of these kind of builds that you're seeing, these mega builds that you're seeing, they look impressive from the outside. But we're not sure if they go into all the strict codes that you see in countries like Japan, for instance, when they're built for earthquakes. That they're being very serious based on the codes of conduct that are set in those countries. Whereas Thailand, I'm not really sure, but it must be more lax, where these cheap building methods might be able to get the project done quicker. It looks amazing, but it might not be able to withstand an earthquake. Crunchy says, Rukshan, from the look back at 2020 and 2021, next pandemic will be on steroids with the WHO in charge. Definitely. The more they can defer to outside bodies, the more that they can subjugate us to all manner of nonsense. Pasco Agwin says, what does he say? Is the right wing rising in Australia like in the rest of the world? Look, online, I think I spend a lot of time, obviously, on X and on the right side, and a lot of the more ultra right wing accounts. Perhaps people that identify as ethno-nationalists do comment on some of the things that I put up and have a go at me and, whatever. But I do sense that people in Australia are getting frustrated with a lot of the things which are happening, which are tending to, push them to vocalize more about things in this country. So people that may have kept quiet about issues like mass immigration and, the reason why mass immigration is a problem, people that might have not necessarily talked about race before, people that didn't necessarily feel the need to talk about those issues in that way are being more vocal about it. So whether that's a rise of the right or just people being frustrated, it's hard to determine. But especially online, I do definitely sense in the last, at least in the last 2 years, the discussion now almost on everything. I think a great example probably is that video that Jacinta Allen put up with the housing, where she's giving it to like a migrant in terms of her appearance. And look, for all intents and purposes, she might be been in Australia for a long time, a citizen, whatever, but people look at that and just see the migrant and they're like, why is this migrant getting a house when there's Australians sleeping on the street or white Australians or whatever, right? So this is the interpretation that people see. So I do think it plays into politics and the rise of right-wing politics perhaps, but I think it's more so around people being more vocal now about things like race and what that means for culture and identity. But in real world terms, the left in this country and these migrant populations are actually the actual centers of power, and they're growing. And, they're kind of getting together in groups. We saw during the last federal election, they're talking about the Muslim vote as a bloc. So these things are happening as well. So, and I think that's actually going bigger and more rapidly and being supported by the mainstream and by politicians and by institutions. Is being promoted. So that's actually going to become more of a force, I believe. And the right's a bit more fractured. It doesn't really have this one mission or one voice. There's lots of different opinions, which is not a bad thing necessarily. It's good to have disagreements and have different opinions, but I don't think it's there's that one goal of victimhood that the left has. For instance, they have this one goal, right, where they're just victims, and that kind of leads them to this path of wanting everything, and everyone's a racist, and this kind of nonsense. Whereas the right's a bit more nuanced, and there's lots of people still, I think, with level heads trying to solve this issue as well. That's because of the echo chambers. You get exposed to talk to someone under 30, all wokies. I think that's in reference to me. Yes, definitely. I'm on X. I'm in somewhat of an echo chamber based on the people I follow. I try to follow a lot of different variety of accounts, but in the real world, my interactions with people in the real world going about daily life is very different to what the interactions on X are. And I try to balance the two. Obviously, you got to balance the two interactions, because online, what people say, and in the real world, even if they're thinking stuff, it's very different. Like, people have different experiences, and again, despite all the problems that we have, the standard of living in Australia, I know people might not be fully on board with what I'm about to say. The standard of living in Australia is still very high, despite all the issues and problems that we have for now. That could become even worse, to an extent where people are completely, frustrated and want to overthrow the government. I don't know. But just in general, the standard of living is still pretty high. And that's, a lot of it has to do with the fact that this is kind of we're setting up this kind of welfare state as well, where the government's getting really involved in, things like NDIS and concepts that you wouldn't find anywhere else really, kind of hide a lot of the I guess the open wounds that we have in terms of problems, and a lot of the government stimulus and plans that they put together try to mask a lot of those issues. And it really turns out to be, how long can they do that for without it becoming something that can't be avoided? And we're slowly getting to that point. I think, society in Australia is becoming more fractured, more divided. It's in your face sometimes, but unfortunately, I think sometimes people have a point as well with the things that they're saying. Keeping everyone happy while they drive us broke. Yeah, that's kind of what's happening. Yeah, definitely. Pharmaceuticals usually tend to go up in price. Just trying to get to some of these comments, see what I missed out. So my comment thing's actually linked to... I'm actually sharing my comment screen, so that's why when I'm moving up, I miss the comments. So some interesting stuff there. Sorry I can't touch on all the comments, guys, because I'll just get completely sidetracked. Actually, yeah, this is a good point. I don't think this has been covered that much in the Australian media, but there is a partial race war happening in Spain. I guess people are saying it's between these kind of African Muslim gangs and the local Spaniard gangs. But I think people are also upset. There was an elderly man that was bashed by some gang of youths or a group of people, and then that's turned into this kind of massive brawl between migrant gangs and local Spanish gangs or Spanish people. I'm referring to as gangs as the way it's being described, but I think it's just people in the towns or whatever, the young people especially, getting together in groups and just fighting each other on the streets. And that is a disintegration of this concept of multiculturalism, where you don't have assimilation, where you just do import a whole heap of people, you just plump them in the country. They're free to do as they please, and more often than not, these individuals do usher in a weakness in society, because they start doing all the criminal activities, right? They start disrespecting people around them. They start creating these crime-ridden enclaves and no-go zones, and eventually it comes to a point where people clash, and Spanish people are very proud, and you're seeing some of that on display right now. Now, whether that we'll see that in Australia, we saw elements of that maybe, some people will say, during the Cronulla riots, perhaps. Something like this. Imagine that on steroids in a whole town. That's kind of what's happening in Spain right now. Maybe for the next episode of the Opposition podcast, we'll bring up some of that stuff to do with Spain. Swindon there on your rucksack. So Swindon, one of my comments all the time. I think he just loves Rukshan. He loves my work. He loves my presence in Australia. So he's dedicated to watching Rukshan all the time. So thanks, Swindon, for joining in again. Larry the Thing says, I saw a man pushing a stroller getting threatened with a knife-wielding gang in Spain. That's out of control. Yeah, I mean, the stuff that's coming out of there is out of control. I even saw footage yesterday of apparently a mosque being set alight in Barcelona. I'm not 100% sure on this. I haven't researched this fully, but definitely there's tensions happening, and we're seeing that in Europe. In Australia, not to that extent. I don't think we're there yet, but I think we will eventually. If it's just left how it is, my prediction is we're going to have these kind of issues in this country. I don't know to gangs fighting each other on the streets and stuff, but it's going to be uncomfortable for people because of the division that's just going to exist within our society. Super chat from Thomas. Thanks for the super chat, Thomas. Hi Rukshan, there is such toxicity at universities that just push very extreme woke alt-left ideas, especially led by uni teachers. Very scary future. Yeah, I mean, I definitely blame the universities for what we're seeing today. Like a lot of this indoctrination that's happened over the last 20 years, we are bearing, the fruits of that are now there to see, right? We have a lot of these kind of psychos out in the public, and these left-wing lunatics, I would say, who are just the degenerates, these Antifa types. We had a guy the other day that was dressed in a mask, threatening death to Australia, death to Israel, death to America, and saying that he's going to exact revenge on Australian businesses. So these people have been indoctrinated over a long period of time into this kind of belief system, which is hostile to, what's good for Australia, in my belief. So, yeah. Let's have a look at... Thanks, Spicy. George puts a faith-based question. What kind of faith do you have? God, spirit, etc.? So I am a Roman Catholic by birth, and I think for a long time I kind of became, in my younger years, I thought I was kind of agnostic, but I've spent a lot of time and gone back to the church in the sense of back to kind of God, back to Catholicism. Recently, when I went back to Sri Lanka, I went to I'm a Roman Catholic, so in the 1500s, Sri Lanka became a Roman Catholic, well, at least the town that my family comes from, that area. And it's very interesting to visit. Just behind one of my relatives' houses, one of my mum's brother's houses, there's an area where the Portuguese kind of landed the priest, that Joseph Fast, that brought Catholicism to that part of Sri Lanka. And there's that exact spot. You can go there. They've built a memorial to Saint Joseph Fast. They've built a church there. My family's very involved in all of that stuff in that area. And it really makes me think about the history and where I come from in the sense of religiously, and where it's kind of taken to me today, and just kind of connecting with those roots of that history. So it was very interesting going with this kind of frame of mind there now. I have not tried Spaniard's kebabs. Wasn't there a fire or something in one of his stores, the one that he recently opened? I think there was, but I do watch here and there. I see some of Spaniard's videos. He was actually in China recently as well. Jeff Ferguson, you certainly complain about Australia a lot. Is there anything about Australia that you like? I love Australia. I mean, I think the ultimate thing is if you love your country, you should be fighting for it, complaining about things, wanting to improve things, wanting to fix things. That is a constant thing, right? It's like tending to a garden. In these political shows, of course, we're talking about politics, and politics is really, you talk about, whatever policy you talk about is because there's some sort of problem. Generally in society, like you're talking about problems, that's when politics comes up, right? good things generally, you kind of enjoy life, and maybe I can do a podcast about sports or hobbies or something like this. But politics generally is like a battle type environment where you're discussing issues and different views. So it's not that I don't like Australia. But I think it's important to discuss Australia and discuss the ways that we can improve Australia, myself included, how migrants can improve Australia, how everyone can improve Australia, whatever. Like, there's different ways you can approach this. I definitely don't spend my time on these shows just bashing Australia. No, I'm criticizing different aspects of policies, and that's just an ongoing thing. I'll take this as a statement. I won't get into this, but Rukshan, for what is happening in Spain and Australia, it will happen white versus Aboriginal. Also, the Muslims will rise up as well. I don't know about white versus Aboriginal. I think if you look at the Aboriginal population in here in Australia, a lot of them, especially in the city, inner parts, they look like just white Australians. Some of them, let's be completely honest. And those problems are, I think, not in that same fashion. Definitely disharmony between up-and-coming migrant groups who are kind of coalescing power over the last few decades, and whose power is growing. Yes, there could be, a bit of argy-bargy there. We've seen a little bit of that before, like I said, so that's possible. Thanks, Madeline. Criticizing government policy isn't criticizing Australia. 100%. I think, Australia is a free country, as much of you might disagree with, in terms of our, rights to discuss the people that govern us and the policies that are around. And that's what makes these countries amazing, that people are arguing about it and fighting about it. If for a long time you just ignore these things, then you end up in situations where you wish you had maybe fought harder to protect things. And today I'm seeing a lot of Australians saying, what's happened to Australia? Like, what's happened? It's not like the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and 90s. And then people are like, oh, well, the government, they didn't tell us, they did all these things and whatever. Well, that's when you should have fought. So today we have to fight the same way. So that's what I think. You can't complain about things in 20, 30 years and be like, oh, well, they did it without us knowing, they tricked us. And a lot of people talk like this about things like immigration, like, oh, they just pushed it through, no one knew. Really? That's the excuse that you're going to go with? Like, if that was such a big issue, you should have been on the streets, you should have been trying to take down your government, whatever. It's no point talking now about the past. So today, you've got to fight for things that you love. I got another super chat from Didi. Can you explain the Islamic problem in Sri Lanka? Look, there is Islam and Muslims in Sri Lanka have coexisted with the Buddhists and the Catholics and the Hindus for a very long time. Very limited issues there. There was an Easter bombing, obviously, a few years ago that was linked to some sort of Al-Qaeda group, and people have said, other involvement maybe from intelligence groups, whatever. It's not the way that people have issues. For instance, in the West, everyone kind of lives side by side. A lot of the business owners, a lot of the shops traditionally in Colombo, in the main city, is owned by Muslim shopkeepers. Sinhalese Muslims and Tamil Muslims. There's all types of Muslims in Sri Lanka, and everyone seems to get along fine. Again, there are small things here and there, but it's a multi-faith, multi-religious society that's been together side by side for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So even though there's fractures, people kind of get along. Everyone kind of, maybe it helps that everyone kind of looks the same. I don't know. Anyway, let's check out these Grok stories. I'll just finish up with the last story that I've got here. RBA proposes eliminating surcharge fees. The Reserve Bank of Australia aims to abolish surcharge fees on debit and credit cards, potentially saving consumers over $1 billion annually. Let's have a listen to the video.
Outdated and costly. After a sweeping review, the RBA says it could save consumers close to $1.2 billion by banning surcharges on all Visa, MasterCard and EFTPOS purchases.
We think the time's come to address some of these high costs and inefficiencies in the system.
Surcharges were introduced in the early 2000s to help consumers make more informed payment choices, but as the use of cash has dwindled, the RBA believes it's no longer working. Some small businesses had feared that in banning surcharges, they'd be forced to drive up their own prices to cover their merchant costs. But the RBA wants to save them too. Today, proposing to lower the cap on interchange fees. That is, how much sellers are charged by their payment service providers. Doing that, it says, would also save small businesses $1.2 billion.
Our goal is a more competitive, efficient and safe payment system for everyone.
These proposals take the onus off consumers and business owners but put it back on the credit card networks. They'd be required to publish their previously hidden fees that they heaped on retailers to help banks providing payment terminals to shop around for a better deal. The Reserve Bank will now take its proposal to a consultation period. Any changes won't come into effect until July of next year.
Yeah, so the great question from Judy. Hey, Judy, hope you're doing well. Do you think the push to drop surcharges is counter the encouragement to use cash? Look, this cash and credit thing, obviously, massive discussion that a lot of, especially people in the freedom movement, have as well. Because you want to have access to cash at all times when the banking system goes down, which it does on time to time. There are instances where massive outages where you can't use your FPOS card or your credit card because the whole machine's gone down or the internet goes down. Cash is king. And if they are forcing people, which it feels like today, right, for everyone to use cards, debit or credit cards, to access goods and to purchase goods and things like this. So there's no choice between using cash and that machine. You go to some shops and they only have card available. You got to pay with card. One of my favorite restaurants, Nando's, is one such place. You got to just use card, right? So they're forcing you. You don't have a choice to pay cash and not pay the surcharge. You have to pay the surcharge. So in that vein, it kind of makes sense that they shouldn't be penalizing people for the only way that the government wants you to use money. But like Judy said, it's like a Trojan horse almost. Like it's like, hey, no surcharges. Everyone use card. Yeah, cash is gone, and this is a good thing. So yeah, moving towards a cashless society. That's what it does feel like. John says cash is king. Seems like they're trying to make themselves more competitive with cash. Yeah. I just feel like it's just the way that things are going in terms of these digital currencies that they want to have. They want to track spending as well. It just feels like they just want everyone digital. Boycott Nando's. I did put up a photo once of myself eating at Nando's, and people were like, Rukshan, how could you eat at Nando's? Don't you know that they are a part of the globalists and they're trying to get rid of cash? And how dare you eat at Nando's? But I love Nando's. Nando's actually means Fernando's. So I'm Rukshan Fernando. I eat at Nando's. It's one of my favorite foods. It's Portuguese, so it matches with my Portuguese linked heritage, being a Fernando from Sri Lankan heritage. So what are you shopping at Nando's, Rukshan? How could you let us down? I can't help it. The paella is so good. It's just like it just hits the spot. So yeah, maybe if someone else makes a paella as good as Nando's, I might consider. Look, I don't mind using. I think that it's not about forcing people to use cash. I think the options have to be there. I don't necessarily mind using my card when I do shopping and things like this. It's kind of become a habit, especially when you travel and stuff. Obviously, you want to handle cash, and there's using cards and stuff is somewhat safer. But yeah, I understand the arguments that people make in terms of protecting, our cash-based societies as well. Having that physical money, I think, is important, especially when, let's say, another pandemic happens in a few years. We saw what they did in Canada when they blocked the truckies from accessing their bank accounts and things like this. So if all your money is tied up in these government, linked systems of currency, where it's digitized in the major banks, and then all of a sudden you can't access your money when you do something wrong because they block you from it and you don't have any cash and no one accepts cash. So yes, definitely by having a cashless society and making everything digital, it allows authorities and governments to have even a larger degree of control over populations. Yeah. Rukshan is a culinary globalist. My taste palette is pretty much just Nando's and maybe McDonald's or something like this. I do not know much about food, but I enjoy good food. But I don't know too much about it. I'm Portuguese. Make your chicken at home. I'm not a very good cook either, but my wife does make an excellent chicken Sri Lankan curry. You can ask. I'll ask Avi Yemini about the show on the show next time. I think he's mentioned it previously as well. Favorite thing at Nando's is actually the paella. It's just easy. Paella grande, the big paella, but it's so expensive. It's like $25 just for having this meal. Jay says when the internet crashes, gold will be the standard again. Yeah, Nando's is expensive. Yep, it is very expensive. So that was the Grok stories. I don't know if that's a good concept. Let me know what you think in the comments. So I just kind of put into Grok top 10 trending news stories in Australia, and we went through them. And I think it's an interesting way of covering news. Obviously, I might work on refining this and maybe getting it to show more tweets so we can interact a little bit more with them. But I think this is kind of the future to put together like this. What stories have I missed? Let's have a look. Just close some of my job windows while I read your chats as well. And how have you guys enjoyed the show today? It was normally we have the opposition podcasts. Avi Yemini is slacking off, so I thought I'd do my Rukshan on X show. How have you guys enjoyed your time with me without Avi? Has it been enjoyable? All right, yeah, I had one more story. One more story, which is a crazy story that I saw from the UK. I'll get to that. I'll just read some of your comments first. Which version of Grok are you using? I'm actually using Grok 4. So that's the latest version of Grok. Grok 4 Heavy is, I think Grok 4 is quite expensive as well. I think paying a fair bit of money in terms of Australian dollars for it. Grok 4 Heavy, I think, is the best one. I think that's like $3,000 or something for the year to use that. But definitely, like the improvements that Elon Musk is making to Grok, I do think it's revolutionary in the sense that this kind of replaces a search engine and makes it a bit more sophisticated, because you can go in here and really search for things based on what Rukshan Fernando has said or something, and bring up all my tweets, and you can't really do that with a search engine. So this AI facility makes sense in terms of improving our lives, but obviously it's going to make people lazier as well. Like you can see, I'm doing my show. This is Rukshan on X powered by Grok. Basically, no research, no preparation. Grok, tell me the news stories for today that's trending on X, and I go through them. So it does make people maybe a bit lazier, which is the downside. But in terms of humanity, I think it does overall improve humanity, but there would be a point where it could have massive negative effects as well. I'll read this just for fun. Rukshan, we like you. Most of us despise Avi. Yeah. Jay's a computer scientist and following all the AI development very closely, especially the basis in programming. Yeah, so I think there's some updates coming to Grok where they're going to have a code engine as well. And you're already seeing them using different tools where they kind of use Grok to create some of the assets or some of the code, and they input it into separate tools to create the games and things like that they're building for XAI. But at the same time, when Grok has all that integrated, to be able to develop your own game, even if it's a simple game or just the basic concepts and ideas of it, is revolutionary. Like AI is going to change all the industries we know today that uses any type of computing is going to be massively changed. If you're not upskilling yourself to understand these kind of AI things as a young person, I think people who are past their 30s and stuff like this, like people like us, doesn't really matter. But as a young person, if you're not upskilling now to understand how these AI things work, you're going to get left behind, really, in terms of how the future is headed. And a lot of traditional jobs that we've taken for granted, especially things like number crunching, accountants, things like this, I think their days are numbered in many ways. These tools are going to become very, very sophisticated in terms of managing things like that. Let's just see what other comments have come through. Economics says, good show, but better if there was a real person you could speak with. Yeah, look, I do have it set up. I've done Rukshan on X with a guest before, and what I do is I get the guest to come on and we'll go through their X account and see what they've been sharing and discuss why they've been sharing those stories and go through those stories. So definitely when I ramp this up again, I will have people calling in, different X users. Maybe one of you guys want to come on the show as well and go through your X and talk about politics or whatever you want to talk about. I'm pretty open to different ideas. I don't want to do the same old boring political pundit talking back show and things like this. I'm a very casual individual. Obviously I enjoy following politics and I follow it very closely, but I don't want to get too bogged down in being a political commentator. I'd rather have this back and forth conversation with people who are watching and engage and interact with some of the comments, because I just find that more interesting. I think generally just seeing what people say and getting people's different opinions and helping that inform my opinions, and also seeing that there's other people out there that have similar views to you perhaps. So I love having the comment on the screen, and even the trolls make it fun. I'll read some more anti-Avi comments. I like Avi, but he doesn't seem informed on what's going on and just starts to talk over everyone. Sounds like Avi. Thanks, mate. One love, Rukshan. Grok was in June. Crunchy, Rukshan, since history is getting lost out of these countries, French, Portugal, Italy, Great Britain and Spain, when they were exploring, which one would you pick? I would pick the Brits. Yeah, I think the Brits were probably the best of the colonizers. Historically, I think they were the best of the colonizers, if that's what you're kind of referring to in terms of that history, and just in general, of course, just the preservation of Western history in Britain, at least up until now. It's crazy when you go to parts of even Sri Lanka when I was traveling, like the old British history there, the way that's preserved is probably better than perhaps maybe in the UK today, because everything's gone woke and you're trying to get rid of the past. But it's not like that in other parts of the world. They still, despite the colonial past, that history is very important. Hi, keep up the consistency and I reckon you'll get more of a following. Yeah, I want to be more consistent with doing these. I do understand that people obviously, they see you go live every day or something and they're like, oh, no, not this again, whatever. Fine, you don't have to always tune in, but I do want to do more of these and kind of cover news every day, because something happens every day, especially in Victoria. I've tended to see that in Victoria recently there's always something going on. Like, it's just insane, our state, in terms of what happens. Make sure we all post how awesome tonight was, and Avi missed it. He might be watching, actually. Avi might be watching and just talking about how of a bad job I'm doing. Jay Good says, you've seen the power and influence social media has had on society. Now imagine theoretically how over time it could very subtly influence the populations who are using it. Yeah, definitely. That's a good comment. I noticed my Indian friends that are new to Australia have British-style teacups. Yes, there's a lot of a lot of the influence from the British in terms of what I see in Sri Lanka has not gone away. So stylistically, or cutlery, or things like this are still very much considered high level style of I don't know if that word is lifestyle or living, but a lot of those products are still kind of used as a thing. So stuff that they would have done in Britain maybe in the 60s and the 50s or in early 1900s is still observed in parts of Asia. That's right, Rookcast in real life. Yeah, I will do Rookcast in real life. I'll do a morning show. Right, this is my idea, a morning show where I just talk about the headlines of the day. Maybe I'll get Grok to help me, I don't know. And maybe one in the evening, Rookcast all the time. And whoever wants to join in on the Rookcast, talk about news and talk about topics, free to do so. But last topic, guys, I promise, and then we'll wrap things up. I've been going for a while. This is a crazy story from the UK. We're talking about the UK, I think. Schoolgirl 12 punished for wearing Union flag dress. This is the turn this off. This is the girl in question. So this is what she wore to some event. Her father says she shouldn't be punished for celebrating being British. It actually ties in what we were just talking about. No, it's all thingoed. Damn, it's behind the paywall. But pretty much, she went to school wearing this outfit for a cultural day, and she was turned around. I'm guessing because it's offensive. So it's a crazy story. Unfortunately, the Telegraph wants me to pay for their news, which I don't plan to do because I won't always read it. But she was wearing this outfit, went to a school cultural event, and was sent back. A 12-year-old girl was left devastated after being put into isolation for wearing a Union flag dress to celebrate being British at a school's culture day. This is what has happened to Britain. So in Britain itself, at this particular school, if you want to celebrate British culture, you will be in trouble because, obviously it's going to offend people in your own, country, in Britain. And that's what I mean. It's crazy. So in parts of Asia, they celebrate British culture and, the British flags, and you go past places, historical places. For instance, when I was traveling through Sri Lanka, you'll see the Union Jack, right? The history's all there. So despite all that, whatever happened to colonization, people are proud of it. And they keep all that. They keep all the names, the English names, everything. But in Britain itself, now this young girl cannot go to a school cultural event wearing the culture of her ancestors and her people because it's offensive now in Britain. This is the way that the West has lost its way. It's completely crazy here. The things that I see here are insane. The fact that there are people in this country, in Australia, especially white Australians, that hate their country, that hate their history, that hate everything about them, and they would rather, let foreign cultures take over, or let foreign histories take over, or tell people that they're oppressors and that everyone else is a victim, and this is stolen land, and just all this nonsense. It's just crazy how it's happening in the West. It's almost like it's people in the West are they've become too crazy about who they are and their place in society. Like it's just this massive ego thing, where it shouldn't be like that at all. That girl should be able to celebrate her culture and do it as a cultural day at school, and it shouldn't offend anyone because they're in the UK, they're living in the UK, they're living in Great Britain, and it's a privilege of living in Great Britain that gives them the freedom to enjoy cultural days, to celebrate other cultures. So why can't you celebrate the British culture? It's insane. But sadly, this is the world we live in, and I don't necessarily always blame migrants for this. I know a lot of people trying to put the blame on the migrants and stuff. You will find that many migrants are actually very patriotic in terms of understanding the importance of country, and many of them will show patriotism to the country that they go to. But what happens is a lot of these kind of left-wing NGOs and organizations and media and things like this will push back against that and tell people to hate the country as well. I see that happening a lot in Australia. You're literally getting model immigrants coming and they're being indoctrinated to hate the country. Or the next generation of, good immigrants, for instance, will have children here. Those kids that have, all the privileges that are given to them by their parents will go to schools here, and those schools will tell them that they're oppressed. When their parents grew up in Australia and they were never oppressed and had all these privileges, all of a sudden their kids who are born here now, to these migrants, are apparently oppressed because of their skin color or their race or some other nonsense like this. So this is the kind of countries that have been created in the West, and it is not helping. I think it's leading to that kind of social decay, the loss of social cohesion, and all these kind of fantasy ideas that we hear governments talking about today. And what do they have to do? What's the cure to all this? It's more laws, hate speech laws. You can't say this, you can't say that, it's going to offend this person. It's insane. Just the basic, common, decent way that we would have interacted with people has been lost now because this hatred that's been borne out for the country. And Australia, unfortunately, with its very short history, its modern Australian history of a few hundred years, is very vulnerable to this. That's why you're seeing this massive attack against Australian identity. That's why I push back against it a lot, because I do think it's important to have a universal identity that people in this country, no matter where you're from, your history, whatever, that identifies, will you identify with that? Because that's the only way you can protect it. The more you fight against it in the sense of, no one can have an identity or whatever, these other groups, the victim narrative sells, is what I'm trying to say. It's easy to be a victim. There's lots of benefits and privileges that come with being a victim. Fighting back against the system and wanting to have your own your combined universal identity with the rest of your fellow people in the country is much harder today. So they would rather us be divided and fighting each other, because it allows them to push through these laws. It allows them to control society more when people are divided, right? Governments can get away with all sorts of crap when people are fighting amongst themselves. That's been shown time and time again, and it really takes people to get together to change the destiny of a nation. So I think that's what's happening. The more you can divide people in the UK and Australia and Canada, and to a lesser extent today in America, because you're seeing a leader in America in Donald Trump who has said, to hell with all that. This is who we are. And, he's kind of setting the agenda. But everywhere else, we don't have that type of leadership. So we are beholden to really the left who are in control. People might disagree with me, but yeah, the left and migrant groups are who, see this as a, for lack of a better term, an economic zone. The way that it's been told to them, that's how it's been sold to them, that this is an economic zone that you can take advantage of, and you can also have the greatest privilege. They will take advantage of that. So it's sadly what it is. I'll see what the super chats are. I think I just missed a couple. This is from Jay. Thanks for joining in, Jay. Great if you're a new follower. I'm a new follower and absolutely love your take on things affecting us all. What's the story? How did you get into doing this, mate? That, Jay, is a long story. Started about 4 or 5 years ago now during COVID. I've always been into politics and I've always had different political views, but publicly expressing my views just happened obviously during the pandemic COVID nonsense that we saw that everyone kind of was put through, and it kind of thrust me into the public light a little bit with some of the work I was doing. Yeah, this is a great one. It's happening here too. Burn an Australian flag at protest, no problems. Burn an Israeli flag, it's a hate crime for sure. I mean, and look, there's two ways to look at that. One of it is that the Israelis, really pride themselves in their flag, for instance, right? Whereas the belief within, I see this in America a lot when the flag is burned. They're like, well, it's a constitutional right, or freedom of speech. You can burn the flag. That's how great we are. We can burn the flag. But at some point, I believe those kind of freedoms are being taken advantage of, and that's what you see. Literally, the way that you disintegrate the West is by taking advantage of the freedoms of the West. Like, that's what's happening. You give ultimate freedom, and you don't nourish that freedom. You don't preserve it. You don't keep it in checks and balances on it. It gets lost. Like that kind of freedom just creates this kind of chaos, really. And this is a very complicated debate to have with people, because obviously I'm someone that supports free speech and free expression, and yes, I understand the concept behind burning a flag, and you can, there's a dispute, you can burn a flag, whatever, but the way that it's done is different. Okay, it's very hostile. It's done in a way to, it's almost like your enemy being in your country and they're burning your flag as an attack on you, and you can't do anything about it. That's kind of what's happening in countries like Australia, where people are doing it as a sign of disrespect, not necessarily of protest, but a sign that this country doesn't exist. It's almost like a war cry of sorts. Now, it's not raised to those levels, of course, but this is why people are doing those expressions, and I think people are, kind of casually pushing it aside, like, oh, this is just these Antifa left-wing lunatics and these radical extremist Aboriginal activists, they're just angry, they're just burning a flag, whatever. But no, actually they're having an impact. They are changing the direction of the country. They tried with the Voice, they were unsuccessful with the Voice to Parliament to separate Australia into the kind of vision that they see, and that's now. Can you imagine from 10-15 years from today, when they eventually Labour people again come up with this idea for the Voice to Parliament, because that's going to be their holy grail going down into the future. When they do that, the young people of today, how will they vote? I think they will vote for it. So things change, time changes, and the more you kind of preserve your history and your flag and your culture, obviously it means a lot. Again, I hear from people that were in Australia in the 60s and the 70s, and they talk about the changes that happened then. Well, look at Australia today. Can you imagine 30, 40 years from now? Yeah, it's not looking good. I don't think it's looking good at all. Judy, yes, because of us in the freedom movement, you rose to fame, but you effing eat from Nando's. I cannot give up Nando's. It is my namesake. It's Fernando. You can forgive me for that. Yes, those the live rallies in Melbourne against the vaccine mandates. It seems like a lifetime ago now, but I think those were interesting time in Australia's history for sure. When we look back on it now, there might be less of that in the future as society is kind of even more disconnected, right? That's what I mean. So when you have a disconnected society where people don't really belong to something, for me, going out uncovering protests and doing those things that I do is because of my belief system in, my values, my Australian values, that, the right and wrong, what I think about government, the role of government, that all comes from my, Western understanding of myself in this country. So that's what leads me to go do that. Now, in the future, when you have more and more people who hate this country and the government has a, pandemic or whatever, less and less resistance to government and what they're doing, because they've kind of subjugated them to such an extent that they're really just, pawns of the government. And that's kind of the way that the world is moving. Probably not using the best terms to describe what I'm trying to say, but I'm kind of going off a bit off track. But yeah, COVID radicalized me. I think a lot of people were radicalized. Catherine, how can anyone dislike Avi? His reporting in Hong Kong gave us China is an asshole. That's true. Avi has many detractors and many supporters. I think that's how you got to be. You can't be loved by everyone. That's what I've learned over the last few years. Like, not everyone's going to love you or, agree with you. And that's okay. That's how it should be. As long as you're true to yourself and you can account for yourself, you can go to bed asleep and you're happy with yourself and what you're doing and what you're saying. That's all that matters. And look, not everyone's going to be 100% on the same page on every single issue. And we're seeing that tested at the moment. I don't want to get into this today. Maybe on another day I'll get into Israel, Palestine. Of course, people sometimes want to know my views, but that is a great topic that kind of shows divisions within society, right? But yeah, guys, thanks for joining me today for Rukshan on X in lieu of the opposition podcast. Avi Yemeni was unavailable today for the podcast, so I thought I'd restart my show tonight. But next week on Tuesday at 7 p.m. we'll be back for the opposition podcast, and also this Thursday at 7 p.m. we'll be doing the opposition podcast as well. I've had a really fun time doing this with you guys today, so I might do more episodes of Rukshan on X, and eventually I might have a schedule. So people, if you want to tune in, you know that this is the day that I'm doing this, and I will definitely have guests on and maybe be a bit more prepared and not just use Grok. Who knows? If you enjoyed using the Grok, let me know. I might just stick to Grok. That was kind of fun. If there's anything else you want me to talk about or do, or any topics that you want me to cover next week, put them in the comments. I'll have a read through it after as well. Obviously, this has been simulcast. If you're wondering where all these comments are coming to, I am on Facebook, YouTube, X at the moment, simulcasting this. So if you're not following me on those platforms, hit me up with a subscribe on YouTube, on Facebook, and on X. I tend to spend a lot of time on X, and even recently more Facebook. Zuckerberg has really softened up a little bit. Facebook has become a bit more open to free expression in a way. I think Zuckerberg's won some of the X audience because he really stuffed things up during COVID. So that's interesting. But yeah, definitely follow me on these platforms. You'll see me post my work. But X is where I'm usually very active as things happen. But again, guys, thank you so much for joining in on this episode. And I will see you all on Thursday night at 7 p.m. with Avi Yemeni for the opposition podcast. Thanks so much and have a good night if you're watching from Australia, and good morning if you're watching from anywhere else. Take care, guys.